All right, so welcome. And again, AJ, please help me if I did not pronounce that correctly, but I do want to welcome everyone. We do have a few housekeeping items before we get started. We would like to ask that the participants stay on mute during the presentation, and the presenters, which you'll have a couple today, we'll introduce them in a minute. We may ask you to unmute during the interactive sessions, or we may ask you to add things into the chat, which our moderator will be monitoring for us. At the end of the session, we will offer a Q&A session as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Next slide. Again, thank you for joining us. This is going to be a 2-hour session designed to teach best practices for the administrative requirements of onboarding your new employee. I would like to introduce, we have 2 trainers and a moderator. So we'd like to do a brief introduction. AJ, would you like to introduce yourself and what your role is today?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is AJ Tapto. I work with Tolani Lake Enterprises, and I will be today's moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we also have Lori, who will be one of our trainers, our teachers today. Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Lori Ritchie, and I'm a consultant for Tolani Lake Enterprises for payroll purposes, accounting purposes, and I will be training today on payroll tax forms and organization.
Great. And I'm Elizabeth Gallardi, and I am a human resource and business consultant for TLE, and I am participating in today's training as well. So thank you guys for introducing yourself. Let's go ahead and take a look at today's agenda. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. I was like, I thought it was me, but no worries. So we can go to the next slide. So today's agenda is really going to be focused on onboarding paperwork. There are different pieces to onboarding that we do recognize that we need to fill some gaps in. But today we're going to really focus on the paperwork piece to really make sure that we're doing the right thing for our employees, but also to make sure that we are in compliance with taxes and payroll requirements. So the way today will look like is that we will do a welcome, which we did welcome. We're in the middle of introductions. We'll finish that here in just a minute. We're going to go over what the learning objectives are. We are going to do a brief overview so you can help determine whether you are hiring an employee or an independent contractor. There is a difference. And then what we need to have legally before onboarding your new hire, what day 1 of onboarding will look like. And we're going to, again, be more specific as to what kind of criteria is required to ensure that we are in compliance. Then we will do a session review, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. The session is planned for 2 hours, and that's because we want to ensure that we have time to answer questions for you as we go through this. To get started, I do have a little quote here, and just to remind everyone that you've made your hiring decision. So we're going to just assume that you've already done the hiring, you know who you're going to hire, whether it is for someone right here within the administrative office, or whether it's for somebody, say, for one of our mini grants in one of our farms, or wherever our mini grants are going out to the community. So the decision has been made of who we're hiring. So we're going to assume that that's already been done. Now we need to bring them on board and start working with us before they work, before the very first day, before they, put one post in the ground, or before they put one finger on the computer to do some administrative work. We have to do some due diligence first. So you've made the hiring decision and the job offer. Now you need to begin onboarding process again before the new employee begins to work. This is the right thing for the employee to get them paid properly, and this is also the right thing to make sure we're in compliance. So you have a little bit of an overview. I ask that you have something to document with, pen, paper. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And in this exercise, I'm actually going to ask you to use the messenger on the chat. And does everybody have access to the messenger on chat? Does anybody have any questions on how to get to the chat? Okay, so on the chat, I would like for you to enter your name, your organization, and what is one thing that you hope to learn in today's session. 5 minutes. So for example, if I were to put in, yeah, there we go. Letha's already starting. Okay, so what's your name? What organization do you work with? And what's one thing you hope to learn today? We'll give you about 5 minutes and then we'll come back together. Good morning. So in the chat, which is on your Zoom, can you walk us through where to find the chat, AJ button?
Yeah, if you go down to your toolbar at the bottom, it should say chat. And then from there you can start typing away. And it looks like I got some.
About 3 minutes to wrap up here.
Elizabeth and AJ, maybe you can invite people to unmute and ask questions if they don't know how to do something, and if we can help them that way. And if you don't know how to unmute, it's that little dealie at the bottom that says either mute or unmute, and there's a red line through it if you're muted.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, so if you do have a question and need assistance with using the chat, or please do unmute. It's like a little microphone dealie at the bottom. If it does have a red line, you would push that to unmute. So thanks, Sean.
Sure.
Okay, we have a nice intimate sized group here. So what we're going to do is go right down this list here, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead and just let us know your name, and you're going to, what you just wrote down, you can go ahead and express to all of us. So your name, the organization that you're with, and what you want to learn. And then we will address these at the end of the session to ensure that we have followed through with this, or that we have addressed your questions that you were hoping to learn. So can I start with Marilyn Reed? Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, your organization, and what you'd like to learn?
Hi, my name is Marilyn Reed, and I actually am a director for Choice Humanitarian. I'm not coming from a business background, as you can see, most likely, but I would really like to learn more about this onboarding process and just be familiar with it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Sean?
Yeah, I've been working independently for a long time in the nonprofit world, and I'm still totally unclear about figuring out the difference between employees and contractors. So I'm very excited to get that clear. And hi, Lori, I haven't met you before in person. We still haven't, but yeah, it's nice to see you.
I know, good to put a face to a voice, right?
And Christine?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Christine Franklin. I am a board member of Cameron Farm Enterprises. I am interested in learning as much as I can in this whole business realm. So I've worked as an independent contractor before. So I kind of know from that perspective. Um, but it would be really interesting to kind of get more additional details on the difference between an employee and an independent contractor, and which works best for different businesses or circumstances. So fairly new. And I also have we started our own little business here. It's a small business. It's an apparel company, and we're hoping to have it grow into something more. So this training will also help us in
Very good.
that endeavor. So thank you.
No, thank you. And then we have, who's next? Are you gonna have to help me? Where am I at now?
I believe
Darrell?
you're on.
Hello,
Dar-
good morning. My name is Daryl Yazzie. I'm the extension agent with the Night Calls Land Grant office. And I just want to learn more about the differences between a contractor and employee, like Sean was saying. Eventually I will be more independent, so I would kind of be moving towards not a contractor, but more of a, what do you call it, a consultant. I don't know if that falls within that category, but I'd like to know more about the differences and how to go about that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully we'll answer some of those questions today. And a consultant, it would kind of fall under contractor in most circumstances, yes, but we'll definitely, hopefully we'll answer those questions today.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and then Rona Williams.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Using my little
Yes.
headset. My kids are homeschooled too. So I was just looking at the forms that you sent us. And I was just trying to, I kind of want to learn the difference between, it sounds like we're going to be doing some contracting work as well. And if my organization, I'm from the Cameron Farm Enterprise, I'm the secretary. If we're going to be using contractors and employees, how to do deductions, it looks like, if there's certain deductions or payroll, that kind of stuff, yada stuff,
Yeah.
kind of yada yada, you know,
Yada
it
yada
looks-
that.
yes, it's looking like a lot of stuff here. So,
Yeah.
and like if I try to do it myself, I'm like way over my head. So
Okay, really good
Just the
question, and I'll just
difference.
kind of address that now. Laura and I talked about that. We are, the goal is to really just kind of give you an overview of the differences, and we have determined that we need to come back with a second training that really dives more into the consulting side of what kind of paperwork that you're going to need to be in compliance. This one will focus more on the employee one.
Okay.
Just through our research, we're learning that there's some gaps in both. So we will go deeper today into the employee one, and then we are going to come back within the next 2 weeks and do one more on the contract side. So hopefully that will help with the yada yadas out there, because I totally get it.
Yeah.
It can be a lot of paperwork. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, ladies.
Yeah, Alita.
Hi, my name is Aletha Johnson. I am working with TLE as a program coordinator, and I was just hoping to get more information on pretty much the same thing, just deciphering between the employee and the contractors.
Very good. I see a common thread running through our wands, so very good. Nalda. Are you with us, Nalda?
Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
Nelda. I'm the admin assistant. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. I'm Nelda, the admin assistant at TLE. I just want to learn to know the difference between all the tax forms.
Okay, well, I think Lori has a surprise for us on some of those differences. So we will definitely be working on that today. Verna. Verna Yazzie.
Right here. Okay, I'm Verna Yazzie, and I'm working with Tolani Lake Enterprises. And today I would like to know the staff of the TLE. I know that it's not everyone, but at least some, just to recognize their roles. And then I didn't include this in my text message, but I would just like a refresher on all the forms and everything else. As TLE does things differently. Of course, they're a nonprofit versus what I have been working with. So that's about it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Verna. And May.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the tools that nonprofits are using in our community. I just want to understand all that, and I'm sure the chapter sort of has the same setup, but I'm sure there's some differences. I sort of want to know what those are, and also to be able to explain to community members and just how nonprofits are used as tools to accomplish things, projects in our community. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm making a note here. Right. Does anybody else want to introduce themselves or let us know what they would like to learn that maybe didn't have an opportunity to put it into the chat?
I think you skipped Christine.
Did I skip you, Christine?
Are there two Christines? I thought I already went. Did nobody hear me?
Yes. Are there two Christines? Christine, are you the board member of CFP?
There's
Yes.
two on the list, it looked like.
I only see one. I see Christine myself. I don't see another Christine.
Okay,
I
Christine
saw
Franklin.
I saw two entries. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Very good. Counting for everybody on the list. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for the feedback and what you're asking for. I really feel that Lori and I will be able to address a big portion of this. There may be a couple of outliers there that we will need to come back and address at another time that may not be a part of this training. But we are both committed to making sure that that you guys have the right tools and the information to do the right thing for the hiring process as it relates to your people, and also as it relates to making sure that we're in compliance for both your employee and the contracted employee. As I said today, though, we will give you an overview of the two, but we are really going to focus on the employee first with that paperwork. And then Lori at the end, if there's any other questions that need to be addressed today on the contract employee that you just can't wait for that training, she said that she would offer that, answering any questions that we might have towards the end. So please don't hesitate to ask us. Can we go ahead and go to our next slide? So our learning objectives today, next slide. At TLE, being a grassroots non-profit, non-government organization, really part of their mission is to really grow our people in our community. And part of that is through training and education. So that is part of the reason for today's workshop. So our goal is by the end of today's session, you will have learned the best practices of understanding if the person you hire is classified as an employee or a contractor, what to prepare for before the new hire reports to work and why it's legally important, and how to properly fill out new hire documents and why it's both legally important and the right thing to do. So again, our goal is to teach best practices for onboarding a new employee to help you guys not worry about all the paperwork and getting it done the first time and moving on. I want to thank the TLE group, specifically Nalda and Alita, for bringing a lot of different opportunities to our attention so that we could bring clear guidelines to the community on how to give you some best practices and solutions so that people can focus more on what the grant work and the nonprofit work is intended to do by doing all of the paperwork right the first time. So thank you, ladies. Can we go to the next slide? All right, the common thread that we had throughout your learning was employer independent contractor. And I'm going to do a brief overview. Lori is the expert when it comes to the legal side of it. I'm going to do the brief overview first, just to give you an idea of some things to look at when you're making that determination of, when I bring somebody on board, are they an employee or an independent contractor? We're going to assume that you've already made the hiring decision, and we're going to do a scenario where we are recommending that if you are if TLE is hiring somebody for their administrative, that we have 2 people involved in that hiring onboarding process. It will be an office personnel and it will be the hiring manager. If you are a recipient of a mini grant from TLE, and this is a recommendation, that the TLE office personnel, program coordinator, and say the mini grant goes to one of our farms, a farm manager, will all go out and meet the employees. So if you have a grant with 5 employees, for example, you guys would all go out and meet those 5 employees to do all the onboarding in one day. So it is important that before we even start any paperwork, when that first day, that we all verify that we have properly identified whether we are hiring employees or independent contractors. Again, that should be done before the hiring starts, but we want to do a second check before we start doing the hiring paperwork. How do I know if it's an employee or independent contractor? Can you go to the next slide, please? So there's some key differences between classifying your new hire as an employee versus an independent contractor. And a couple of them are how taxes are paid and the control over the worker itself. So in a nutshell, and again, Lori can talk about this here shortly, but taxes, if you are a independent contractor, you are responsible for all of your taxes. And if you're an independent contractor, it clearly has to state in your contract that you are responsible for that, and that the employer, and we'll use TLE in this case, is not responsible for any of that. So you have full responsibility for all of your taxes. If you're an employee, that's when the payroll taxes and other taxes come into play, where it is managed by the employer. And again, that's what Lori's going to talk more about. The second piece is control over the worker. So an independent contractor is more in control of the work they do, where in employees, we control that work. So let's take a look at what that might look like. Can we go to the next slide? So an employer versus a contractor. So these are some of the behaviors that the IRS looks at. And I only say some of the behaviors because not every contractor and every employee is going to look exactly the same. There could be some overlap. This is the general idea of what we want to look at between an employee and a contractor. So there is behavior control, there's a financial control, and there's the type of relationship. If you're an employee, you typically have set hours and guidelines in completing the job. So if you're my bookkeeper, I'm going to tell you I need you there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I need you there from 8 to 12. And this is what I need you to accomplish on these days. So that would be an employee, right? A guaranteed wage or salary, payroll tax withheld, which is typically a W-4. So financial control. What kind of financial control do we have over you? And then type of relationship. This can be full-time, part-time, or temporary employee for us. but you're really working for that employer and you need to follow their guidelines. An independent contractor set their own hours and decide how the project should be completed. So typically they will have a contract with a scope of work that says, this is what we need to have completed by this time. They will typically have their own tools, and they manage it all themselves. So for example, I'm contracted because I'm a consultant, and I know that somebody brought that up about what about consultant work. I have all my own tools to do the work that I need to get done. I do it on my own time. I have worked out like what are my goals and objectives to help TLE out. Same with Lori and with Sean. So that's basically in a nutshell a contract. The financial control is that the independent contractor is either paid a flat fee per project or hours, and they're responsible and liable for taxes associated and earned income. And they typically will fill out a W-9, which we're not going to cover today. We'll cover it later, or or the 1099 NEC, which just went into effect in 2021, which we'll go into later as well. The type of relationship is typically the contractor sets their own time period and number of projects that they're going to be able to complete in that time frame. So again, the big differences is the control over behavior, finance, and the type of relationship. When I talk about the employee's relationship, the employee is eligible for any benefits that the company may have. They are eligible for any state benefits. So for example, in Arizona, you might have to help me out with this, Lori, but in Arizona, if employees work so many hours, they get so many hours paid time off. I don't recall exact number that the time off is for Arizona. Do you?
Yeah, it's 0.33. They accrue hours of 0.33 minutes per hour worked, up to 40 hours a year of what they would call Arizona mandated sick pay time, not PTO.
Okay, so those are the benefits that an employee would get, whereas an independent contractor would not. If there's any paid holiday time, an employee would receive that, an independent contractor would not. So those are just some of the differences in the two. I am going to ask some questions and do a little bit of a workshop here.
Elizabeth, we have a question in the chat.
Okay. Is it from Sean?
Yes.
Okay, let's say we want to contract with a grower who will do everything on his or her own timeline for a flat fee, but will use TLE shovels and tractors, employer contractor. Can we hold that for a minute and do our exercise and come back to that, Lori?
That's Sean.
I know, I'm asking you.
Oh, yeah, let's address that. I'm going to address these things, the details of what defines that in just a little bit. So let's hold on to that question until I'll make a note, but let's hold on to that question until a little bit further along. Okay.
Okay. Are you okay with that, John?
Sure. Happy to.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we have a couple of scenarios that I want to throw out there. I like that scenario. I might have to steal it for future, but all right. So I'm going to ask you guys to listen to this situation, and then you can just add your feedback into the chat here. I am hiring a temporary bookkeeper that I need to work 15 hours in the office. 10 hours can be remote. How should I classify them? As an employer, independent contractor? Any guesses? Put it in the chat. We have independent contractor. Anybody else? Employee, okay. Anybody else? Employee, okay. Okay, really good. So Lori's going to correct me if I'm wrong on this answer. So for this situation, because I am asking them to work 15 hours in the office, they can work 10 hours remote. They are temporary, and I am asking them to come into the office to work a specific schedule. They would more than likely be an employee. However, I could make work this. I could have a bookkeeper that is a contractor. I absolutely could if I change the conditions. Lori, do you have feedback on that?
Verify. Yeah. So most service providers, even though you're asking them to work 15 hours a week in or out of the office, it doesn't matter. I would normally classify those people as independent contractors, honestly, because it would be a temporary situation. If they had you, plus if you paid them as a temporary employee, they would be accruing benefits as Arizona sick pay. And if the company offered any other benefits, i.e. 401k or anything like that, they would then start to qualify if there was no part-time, full-time terms in the employee handbook. So honestly, that answer is kind of going to be twisted based on the employee handbook and what their guidelines are for benefits and the circumstances of the services offered. So it depends on the circumstance. It depends on really the guideline of the employee handbook for that type of service, for that job.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So everybody was correct. Nobody was wrong.
Everybody was correct. It just depends.
Right, and that's going to be okay. So the next
And,
one, are you ready for
and let me interject one more thing. I know a couple of you had said that you're starting a business or you're just getting going on certain guidelines. The most important thing is to think about what you have in your handbook, because if anyone ever came back and said, if any employee or independent contractor came back and said, I never received any benefits, you want to make sure you have that outlined in your employee handbook for that reason. So you have an answer right there when they're hired, they've signed for the handbook, and all questions should be answered at that point.
Thank you. All right, ready for the next one? Any questions on that before we move on to the next scenario? Okay. I'm a program coordinator, and I have a mini grant with one of our farm managers, and they are hiring 6 full-time employees for a 12-month grant to restore farms in the area. The manager has specific duties for these employees, and the employees will use the farm's tools as well as supplies. How should they be classified?
Can you repeat the scenario for me, please?
Absolutely. I'm a program coordinator. I'm working with my farm manager on a mini grant, and they are hiring 6 full-time employees for a 12-month grant that is to restore farms in the area. The manager has specific duties for these employees on the hours they should work, on the tools that they should use, and on the type of product that they should use. How should these employees be classified? How should these new hires be classified?
As an employee.
Kind of gave it away.
It's in the scenario.
So yes, and again, we're going to have our expert, Lori, help clarify that. But based on the fact that we are going to give them their schedule, we are giving them the tools to use, and we are providing all of the supplies, they should be classified as an employee. We could do some other things where they would classify them as a contractor, but based on this scenario, the best thing to do would be an employee. Lori, could
That
you-
is correct. Yes. Always an employee in that circumstance.
Okay, last scenario, and this is almost goes hand in hand with Sean's question. A manager is hiring a subject matter expert in the area of growing native crops. This person will work with multiple farmers to support the growing farm process. They have control of their own schedule. They have their own tools, and they have access to purchase supplies. How should they be classified? Do you want me to repeat it? A manager is hiring a subject matter expert in the area of growing native crops. This person will work with multiple farms to support the growing farm process. They have control over their own schedule, they have their own tools, and they have access to their own procurement. How should they be classified? Lori? I don't know if you see the,
Yeah, that's all correct. Independent contractor is correct. You
Thank
guys are
you.
getting this. You're getting it.
So those are just general rules to follow. We started with the bookkeeper, which that one could go either way, depending on what arrangements we make with that bookkeeper and how we follow that through. The hiring the 6 full-time employees, we went towards classifying them as an employee, mainly because I use employee in my in the work that I said, but mainly because we are directing and controlling their work. And then the last one with the subject matter expert, based on their work and then being more independent, become an independent contractor. So that's just a really an overview of can we go to the next one, please? So this is a quote from the IRS that I wanted to share with you. There's no magic or set number of factors that make the worker an employee or an independent contractor, and no one factor stands alone in making this determination. Also, factors that are relevant in one situation may not be relevant in another, such as bookkeeper is a good example, because a bookkeeper could be brought on as an employee, it could be brought on as a contractor based on the situation. When we are done, you can always go to the irs.gov for more information. We are going to bring up more information in a couple of weeks on independent contractors so that there's more clarity. It sounds like there's a need for it, so we will definitely work on that for you guys. So now let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to
Elizabeth, sorry.
assume that, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to ask, is the tools, I think your slide explained it. So having your own tools does not disqualify, or using somebody else's tools does not disqualify you as an independent contractor if all the other conditions are met, you think? That was my question. So I just wanted to.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I was just going to address you actually. So that's a whole, so part of that answer is a liability cause. So if you have somebody that's a farm worker and they're bringing tools like shovels, you know, what they consider small tools in the tax world, that will be, they can go both ways. But if that person, if we are telling them, hey, we want you to work on the farm from this hour to this hour to get this project done this week, and or they're working for a mini grant and we're bringing them on as an employee, but we're providing them the tools, they're an employee. If a person is a specialist, say they're a plumber, they're, you know, an irrigation specialist, something like that, I would pay those people as an independent contractor and they would be bringing their own tools as well. So it just depends on the type of project they're doing and what their specialty is, honestly. Can you give me an example of do you have a specific person you have in mind or project you have in mind?
Right. It's one person who has been both an employee and a contractor for TLE, and it is growing at the TLE site, and they do have a tractor, and it would be silly for him to bring a tractor to the site if there's already a tractor at the site. So operating that tractor, does that throw him in one category or another? And
No, so it's actually better for the company if someone's using heavy equipment, which would be considered a tractor, for that to be under the company's liability. If he gets hurt on the job, then you're going to have a big problem. If he's a contractor, if someone's a contractor and they're working heavy equipment, you want to make sure they're insured, right? So they can't come back and blame or sue the company for any workers' comp or anything like that. So I would suggest that if you have heavy equipment on site, that your insurance is number one, covering all drivers, right? And all operators for that purpose. And or if they bring their own equipment and they're contracting with you, that they are also hold their own insurance so they don't come back and try to get funds out of a nonprofit for an injury.
that's super helpful. Thank you. And groups can insure contractors on site, like the
Yeah.
organization could. Awesome.
Yeah, if you do additional insureds and really, if you need help, honestly, if you guys need help having your insurance policies reviewed so I can help you with that, I'd be more than willing to take a look at what your coverage is right now.
Perfect. Thanks for taking time for that. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no problem. All right.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Lori.
Elizabeth, we have a chat from Marilyn, and it says, is there one word or clause that makes a difference between an employee or a contractor?
Again, so I would say the biggest word that deciphers between the two of them is taxes. Okay. You're either going to pay for that a portion of those person's withholdings for employers' taxes. And if they're a contractor, you're not. That's the biggest deciphering word in a clause that you can use is as a contracted or what we call in the tax world a non-exempt employee. The biggest word is you're liable or not liable for your taxes, depending on your relationship with the company. Does that help?
Yeah, I was just wondering, this is Marilyn, like when you're trying to decide if an individual is going to be an employee or a contractor, is there like, I'm understanding it a little bit better as you guys are explaining it. I'm thinking that there's like one thing that kind of determines whether they're going to be an employee or a contractor. Like the word, the way we word it, or like you're saying, if the person is bringing their own specialty and they use their own tools, then they would.
Did we lose her?
I don't know. Did we lose your connection?
She's joining back on, I believe.
I'm sorry, I lost you. Sorry, I got dropped off.
It's okay. Can you say that one more time? You were breaking up really bad. I just want to make sure we answer your question properly. Can you repeat your concern?
Well, I was just thinking to myself that in order to determine if a person is going to be an employee or a contractor, there must be like in terms of like being having special, using that to work or to do something for the nonprofit would determine that they are a contractor. So I was thinking maybe the word specialized individual will simply be a contractor. Does that make sense?
Marilyn, can you turn off your camera? Because I think we aren't hearing audio very clearly. Maybe that'll help.
My camera's not on.
Uh-oh, no other tricks up my sleeve then. Sorry.
Go ahead, don't worry. I think I'll find the answers and keep talking.
So Marilyn, I do want to address that. So I think that through the breaking up, so one of the things is how do you address, how can you like look at it with one word to say, am I going to hire a contractor or if I'm going to hire an employee? There is the one for the taxes, and that's the employee itself. Like the employer, they're going to pay their own taxes. That, but maybe another way to think about it is, in my it's like a plumber. They have all the tools, they have everything they need. Maybe thing you can think of when you're hiring somebody. Am I hiring somebody that I know they know what they're doing, I just need to hire them to get this job done? I could possibly put them into the contractor role because I don't give them the hours. I tell them I need something done by this time, and this is the scope of work. They could possibly go into that contractor role. And at that point, which we'll do another training, we still need the proper documentation for them as well. So I don't know if that helps or not. I know that we're happy to help, after this call as well, if you have something happen before the next training. But to kind of put it into one word, there's the behavior and then there's the taxes.
Yeah,
right?
and can I interject here? I just want to say, like, after we have this workshop, I'll have Elizabeth email everybody with my email address as well. So if you guys have specific circumstances where you have questions with a service provider or a possible employee, you can email me directly and I can help you with your scenario at that point. And again, we're going to have a bigger workshop on this, independent contractor / employee workshop, to go more into detail, to answer more of the legality questions with this. But if you have a specific scenario after this workshop, before we have the next one, please email me before you start assuming or guessing what that rule is. Because it does, those two it's a gray area. On IRS paperwork, it definitely depends on your office scenario, the scope of work, and it's a very individualized decision. Okay.
Next slide, please.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, Aletha, I don't know, I saw your question in the chat. Does that help to email Lori your question?
So I think that's going to be a good question when Lori will bring that. Will that be a question for your training session? You want to answer?
I'm reading it right now. I just pulled it up. Hold on a second.
And then Verna, Form 1099 and W-4. There's also the W-9. So
you're breaking up now, Elizabeth. You're breaking up.
Yeah.
So with Aletha. Can you guys hear me? Am I breaking up at all?
Working next door.
I can hear you, Lori. Can everyone else hear
You can
Lori?
hear me.
I can hear fine with Lori.
Okay.
Okay, so Elizabeth is breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, right. So let me address this. Okay, let me address this question, this one question for Aletha. The question is, if we have someone working on multiple projects, can we use one employee application for the whole year? The answer is yes for that. An employee is an employee. It's how you keep your bookkeeping in your actual software on where you apply those hours to project bookkeeping. So that is what would decipher how you're paying them per project. It is within your bookkeeping system. As well as the W-9 for the calendar year, yes, you would keep the same W-9 for each contractor. It doesn't matter if they sign, from one project to the next, you would keep the same W-9. They would get one 1099 at the end of the year for whatever they worked within the calendar year. And you don't have to keep retaining those W-9s per project. But you do want to make sure I usually send 1099s out. New W-9s out for the following calendar year at the end of December. So when I'm running my reports on my vendors that are 1099 employees at the end of, around December time before tax forms go out for annual taxes, I review my list and then I mail or email out new W-9 forms because sometimes they update them within the IRS system for the following calendar year. So I always send a new W-9 form out to my 1099 employees if I know I'm retaining them for the next calendar year. Okay. Does that help?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Okay. Before the new hire onboarding, and we kind of already bridged into this a little bit. Lori's going to go into more detail here in a minute, but we're just going to talk about this is a best practice to get prepared before day one of onboarding. So you've already made the decision, you've already got the hiring, you and the office personnel, hiring manager are going to meet together with the whole group of new hires, whether it's in the office or whether it's out at the work site, and the following should be conducted. So can we go to the next slide, AJ? Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so be prepared to welcome your new hire or rehire. Before the new hire is onboarded, the following is created and kept in the main office. You have a personnel file, it's created, and in there you'll want to have your new hire checklist ready to go. So when you meet them, you have everything all in one spot. We have sent you a abbreviated checklist out with the paperwork that needs to be taking place for the employee. TLE is working on a new hire whole onboarding for employees that is more inclusive, but for right now you do have the abbreviated version of what you need to bring on a new employee. You have to have a separate confidential file created for, I have a typo there, for medical. So there's two employee files that have to take place. One is their personnel file, and the second one is a medical file. Medical information cannot be kept with personnel files, just as an FYI. Your personnel file would have all of the legal documents from hiring, any documentation from any performance reviews, any corrective actions, anytime you do a pay change, any of that goes into their personnel file. Anything that has to do with any kind of, because of the HIPAA, anything with medical, you have a separate medical file that only the manager has access to. Before you do day one, bringing that new hire on board, you want to ensure that your reference checks are completed and or personal recommendation documented completed. We are making a recommendation at TLE that If it's somebody new that you do 3 reference checks, or if it's a personal recommendation, if you've recommended somebody, that you have that person sign that personal recommendation to go in their hiring file. Any interview notes should be in the file. Background checks received and reviewed. We are beginning to do background checks on select positions, specifically those in the administrative roles that will be managing cash, that will be involved in cash will go through a background check. New hire application or contract and file needs to be in the file when you go meet them. If you have not picked it up yet, you need to make sure that that employee brings it to that first day. And then the new hire job offer contract needs to be in that file. So by time you meet your new employee, your new hire, you should have all of that collected or be ready to collect what you haven't collected. We want to make sure that, again, we are being thorough, efficient, and fair and consistent with everybody that we bring on board with TLE. We want to make sure they're getting paid properly, and we want to ensure that we are being in compliance with everything that is legal. That is just my brief overview of what to bring prior to. We're going to give you guys a 5-minute break, and then Lori's going to take us through onboarding. See you guys back in 5 minutes, which would be 37, which is 12:37.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds
Okay,
Ready,
thank
set,
you.
go.
Go.
Is everyone back?
not too sure.
This is Christine. I'm back.
Do a roll check real quick.
Lita? Christy, I heard you. Verna? Rona?
Here.
Verna's here.
Sean? Daryl?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. May?
She said she's back in the
May's
chat.
here.
I'm
It's
back.
back.
This is
Yeah.
Marilyn.
Thank you. Okay, great. All right.
Okay, ready?
It's yours, Lori. Take it away.
Okay.
Want to change
You want to go to the
screen,
next
AJ?
slide for me? Okay, we're going to talk about onboarding. And onboarding is, I think Elizabeth emailed everyone a packet this morning. Yes, did everyone receive that packet of information? I want you to put that in front of you as we review the rules and legalities of all these forms. I want to make sure you have them in front of you. You can take notes on these forms. And if you have any questions, we can address those. I'll go through one form, and then after I'm done with each form, we'll go through question and answer for each form individually. Okay. I'm not going to take, it's just easier to do that instead of waiting till the end, till everything's addressed. Let's go one form at a time. So let me see, I'm trying to make sure I have my chat up here too, so I can see all of you. Okay, so the first form that we want to talk about is a new form to your guys' eyes, and that's the payroll new hire change of status form. Everyone have that in front of them? This form I use with all the companies that I consult for. It's very easy, to the point, and it's very universal for any company, no matter if it's nonprofit or for-profit. So for you, those of you starting new businesses, go ahead and utilize this template. It's a really good tool, and anyone jumping into an onboarding process or any staffing process can use this form, or go back to it and know how it reads. All right. So there's two boxes on the top. One of them is new hire, which is obvious. That's when you first hire somebody, you're bringing them on board and you're making sure their forms are here. The next box is change of status. Change of status falls into, they've had a review, they're getting a rate of pay change, or even if they're a rehire, you can use this change of status form if they're rehiring to another project. If they're going from one project to another and their rate of pay is changing, you would still use this form. Okay. So that is what those two boxes are. The employee name, obvious, the date that this form is being filled out, and then the start date is actually when they're going to start the job, when their timesheet starts, when their project is starting, if they're a contractor even. That is their start date. That is the date they start getting paid. The next on this checklist is the Arizona withholding form, the federal withholding form, which the Arizona withholding form is an A4. The federal withholding form is a W4. Their I-9 employment eligibility verification form. The IDs for the I-9s should be on this checklist as well. That's how you're going to verify the supporting documents for the I-9 form. The CIB form for the Indian blood, and direct deposit form. And then you'll notate the rate of pay. So if they're a salaried employee, you're still going to put their salary on this form as their rate of pay. If they're an hourly worker, you would put that as rate of pay. I use the checkbox, the rate of pay, to put the amount. And also I use this line to write down kind of their position. So if they're an administrative position, I'll write rate of pay bookkeeper, or I'll write rate of pay laborer, whatever role they're taking. It kind of, this form helps the person that's posting all the payroll information into the payroll system. So this is a useful tool for anyone that's posting all the tax documents into the system, and for everybody that's doing the hiring process. This keeps you organized. And then underneath that are the checkboxes for full-time, part-time, and temporary. Where it says other, you can put whether they're a contract worker. If they're an independent contractor, a 1099 employee, you can put that there as well. And then the bottom line is entered into payroll system by whomever is posting that, whether it's a bookkeeper or I think Nalda, you're doing the inputting into QuickBooks for payroll purposes. that person would sign and date when the date would be when the information was actually posted into that payroll system. So that is the new hire form. Does anyone have questions on that? And if I'm going too fast, let me know. I'm trying to stay within our time limit here and we have a lot to review. And I want to get everyone's questions answered. So please let me know if there's any questions in the chat regarding this form. All right, all good. So if you would go to the next slide. Okay, so use the onboarding payroll checklist to make sure all the proper documents have been received and reviewed prior to the employee's start date. We want to make sure that everything has been received by the office or the hiring manager. We want to make sure that all the paperwork's been turned in a timely manner to that bookkeeping or payroll specialist so they have time to enter the information in before that person lands on the ground to start work. This is to make sure we have all the forms we need. We are trying to protect TLE legally, and that is one of the key reasons why we do this. And we want to make sure the employee is getting paid on time. So that is number one. Number two, the following payroll documents will be in the new hire packet for payroll. And that would be the new hire change of status form. And these should all be in your packet you received today. The W-4, the A-4. The W-4 comes with instructions as well. That is for the employee to use as a guideline to make their tax withholding decisions. It is not the company's legality to tell people how they should withhold because they know their tax situation. We as employers do not, okay? So that is why they give these worksheets out. The A4 is the state withholding election form. Again, there's instructions on that for the employee to read, so they are making their own decision for their tax withholding purpose. The I-9 is the employment eligibility verification form. This form is very important for legal purposes and for the company itself. This proves that this employee is a US citizen, number one, so we can run payroll and withhold taxes, or if they're legally permitted to work within the states, there's supporting documentation for that purpose as well. There is a list of instructions that goes along with that form. This instruction form tells the employee what documents they need to support that I-9 form. And it also helps us as the hiring managers to tell us what we need to receive from the employee based on their verification form, how they answered it. And we'll go over this in more detail in a little bit. The next form is the direct pay authorization for Tolani Lakes. It has their logo on it. This form is for direct deposit only employees. I know that there's a lot of employees that work on the reservations that get paid by check, and that's fine. When that circumstance is happening, I would definitely make a note on that hiring status sheet, that first sheet we just went over, the new hire status sheet, to put next to the direct deposit line where there's a checkbox. I would make note employee paid by check if that is the case. This notifies the bookkeeper that they will not be receiving a direct deposit form and how they will be getting paid, that it will be a hard check. Any questions on that? Just form review real quick. Okay, next slide. Okay, so everybody, please have the W-4 form in front of you. And let's review each step on this W-4 form. It is necessary to have make sure that this whole form is filled out clearly. The handwriting is clear and legible, so it can be posted into the payroll system, and that there are signatures at the bottom of the page. So we'll go through each step. Step 1 is to make sure that the name and address are filled out clearly. The social security number is legible. Their tax filing status is marked, whether they're single or married filing separately, they're married filing jointly, or they're a qualifying widower, or if they're filing as head of household. Step 2 only applies if someone is working multiple jobs, or if their spouse is also working. You can mark this, you can make sure that the employee has marked this box. If it's unchecked, they've chosen not to elect that deduction to post into the W-4 system. And so if it's unchecked, that's okay. That's their choice. Step 3 is a little worksheet area to claim their dependents. If someone has children, and this is also notated in the general instructions that's given to the employees along with this withholding certificate. The general instructions explain every single section of this withholding certificate, and we'll give them guidelines on what to mark. But this will be entered into the payroll system. So if there is nothing marked here, it is not going to be posted. If someone comes back later and says, hey, I forgot to mark my dependents, they're more than welcome to fill that back, fill in that space if you give the form back to them and give it back to you. Step 4 is other income. So if they're getting paid other income and say as an independent contractor and they want to they're working as an employee for you, but they're getting paid as an independent contractor through somewhere else, they can actually utilize this section to have extra withholdings taken out of their paycheck to compensate or make up for the withholdings they're not getting taken out of an independent contractor payment. That's a weird circumstance, but they do have that option on this form. Deductions is other circumstance that they can utilize. And then C is an extra withholding for each pay period. So if they feel like not enough taxes are being taken out of each paycheck based on what's already been entered, they can elect to take extra withholding. Based on these new forms, sometimes it doesn't seem like they're taking out enough taxes when you put them into the payroll systems, and people might not even recognize that until they're actually getting paid. So they might ask for this form back and say, hey, can I take out an extra $25 a pay period out of my check to make up for taxes or whatever? They can take this form back from you and fill in that blank, and then that can be posted into the payroll system as well. Very
Lori,
important thing. Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but we have a question in the chat from Aletha.
Okay.
And it says, for the address, does the person have to give a physical address as well as mailing, like a PO box?
So this address will be a mailing address. This is where their 10-9 or their W-2s at the end of the year will be mailed to. Okay. So step 5 is the employee's signature and the date that they signed it. And the last section is the employer's only section. Whoever the hiring supervisor or the accounting or bookkeeper, whoever is posting this into the payroll system should make sure that this name, employer's name and address is filled out. The first date of employment, which is the date that person lands on the ground to start working, which is their first date, their timesheet should start to get paid. And Tolani Lake's employer identification number needs to be put in the box next to that. Any questions on this form? Okay. Next slide. Okay, the next form we're going to review is the A4 review. This is the Employees Arizona Withholding Election form. This form is not very detailed. It should be easy to review for the hiring manager and the payroll specialist. So everything that is included on this form needs to, again, be very legible because this is going to be used for data entry into the payroll system. And the employee signature is the most important thing on this form. So the name, social security number, the address, and box 1 or 2 needs to be checked. If this form is returned with no boxes checked, it needs to be handed back to the employee to make sure a box is checked. We don't want to assume what kind of tax elections the employees are taking. And again, a signature from the employee needs to be put on the sheet along with the date it was signed. And I'm asking all hiring managers or the bookkeeper, whoever's seeing this document and reviewing it first for any of these documents, please initial the bottom of each of this page and each one of these withholding forms. So if anyone looks back at the file, we know who reviewed it. We know that it was reviewed. And so if there's any questions later from the employee, we can go back and say, oh, let me take it back to this person that initialed the page. We can ask questions as a go-to note. Any questions on the A4?
Yeah, if a lot of these employees work on the nation, then we don't do this form, right?
This form still has to be done. All these forms legally have to be in the. Who's speaking?
Sorry, this is Gary Biketti.
Hi, Gary.
So, hi there. So being on Navajo, we're tax exempt from the state, but they still have to fill out this form.
Right, and then they would just check box 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. The reason why is because Arizona Department of Economic Security can come in at any time and audit, especially being nonprofit. I mean, it seems like nonprofits get flagged all the time for audits. And so they expect this form to be in the employee's file, even if there is 0 election, even if, you know, there is no tax liability for this state for Navajo Nation, it still needs to be filled out and in that employee file.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, let's go to the Form I-9, which is the Employment Eligibility Verification Form. This is another key document that has to be kept in the employee's file for legality purposes for any audit, whether it be federal or state. The federal government will do audits for nonprofits for these forms only, specifically. They won't even look at your other forms, but they will have you pull these Department of Homeland Security forms if you get queued to audit. Excuse me. So let's review this. Section 1, again, every box in section 1 needs to be legible and easily keyed into a system, into a payroll system. You want to make sure that the name, address, date of birth, their social security, the email address, and telephone number are all legible and filled out. Under the attestation, there's box 1 through 4. One of those needs to be checked. At the bottom of the attestation, there's a signature for the employee and the date that they sign it. And underneath that, there's a preparer and or translator certificate or certification, I'm sorry. And one of these two boxes needs to be checked if applicable. So it says, the first one is, I did not use a preparer or translator, which means the employee filled out this document themselves. The second box is, a preparer or a translator assisted the employee in completing that section. If someone else filled out the document for them, they need a check box. They need to mark that box. Underneath that, there's another attestation, which is a signature of the preparer, which could be the employee or the translator. If it is a translator, all of their information needs to be listed, not the employee. It would be the translator's name, the date, and their address. Any questions on this page? Okay. Go to page 2.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, this one is kind of confusing the way you talk about it.
Yes.
If there's a translator involved,
Yes.
does their name go into section 1 area? That's where I got confused when you said translator needs their name and address.
Under section 1, the person getting paid will go, their information will go under section 1 on the top part, the top informational portion. If there's a translator involved, the bottom portion will have all the translator's information where it says signature of preparer or translator. And
okay.
The translator information will go on the bottom. The employee information will go on the top.
Okay.
So
You
does
good?
So does TLE provide a translator if it's their forms?
You know, I've worked with several different nonprofits and for-profit companies that are on the reservation. And if there is a translator involved, it's usually someone in administration that will help them with the forms. So that's up to administration, how they want to provide services for that, if it is necessary. Sometimes it's a family member. It just depends on that employee's situation.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, you want to go to page 2 now. So page 2, section 2 is the documentation portion. Can you go to the next slide, please? There you go. So the top line, this section 2 is for the employer only to fill out. Okay, this is the employer authorized representative review and verification. So whoever's retaining page 1 for Tolani Lakes, whether it's a hiring manager or it's in the administration office for payroll purposes, that person needs to fill out this portion of the form. So the first portion is the employee information from section 1. So the employer will fill out the last name, first name of the employee, and the citizenship or immigration status that the employee marked from page 1. So boxes 1 through 4, if they marked number 1, you only need to put US citizen. You would write US citizen in that box. If it was number 2, you would write non-citizen. If it was number 3, you would put permanent resident. And if it was number 4, you would write alien authorized to work. So that's how that box would be filled out. The next section on this page is the lists. These list A, list B, list C. You can utilize page number 3 to write in the documentation that would go on page 2. So for instance, it says on page 3, employees may present one selection from list A or a combination of one selection from list B and one selection from list C. So I'm just going to give you an example of the most common that are turned in. Usually you would get a driver's license and a social security card from an employer or from an employee to the employer. The next most common would be a passport. If someone gives you a passport, you do not need to receive a document from list B or C. You could just use the passport. If someone gives you a driver's license or an ID card or a voter's registration card or a Native American tribal document, you would need another item from list C, whether that be a social security card or a birth certificate. So again, it depends on the first document that the employee turns in, what the second one would be. If there are, go ahead.
So if they are showing you these documents, then do you take these documents and Xerox them and put them with this form?
You would make a copy of them and put them with the form for backup. So if we ever get audited for any reason from any federal entity or state entity, we have proof that yes, we've retained the information, we have copies of the information, and we've completed filling out this form of what they turned in. We have proof of everything. Below the ID portion, the supporting document portion, there's another attestation. The employee's first day of employment, which would be the day they started getting paid, would go on that line. And underneath that, the signature of employer authorized representative would sign, date, write their title, put their name, the TLE, they would put the organization name and the organization's address to complete that section. Under section 3, it says re-verification and rehires. So this can get complicated. This gets confusing to people because it's like re-verification, why, when, and why do I need to re-verify? The most common time when I would re-verify IDs is if a woman gets married and they change their last name. If that does happen, then she would have to provide the updated documentation, whether that be a social security card where the last name change has been done, or a driver's license where the last name change or the new name change has been done. That's for section A, or that's for section 3, number A. And then under number B, the second reason why you would use this form is for rehire. So if someone was an employee, the project ended, you got a new grant, you rehired somebody, then you would re-verify all the supporting documents, make sure there's been no address change, no last name change, any new information, even down to an email change. And then you would put in all the new information and put their date of rehire under section B. Number C is if the employee's previous grant of employment authorization has expired. So if they've marked on page 1 that they were a non-citizen or an alien authorized to work and their authorization expired, that's when, if the authorization expires, when they get their new authorization, you would put that information under C, the new authorization to work. And at the bottom of the page, this is for the employer authorized representative who, again, filled out this form, confirmed the information. They would sign, date, and print their name at the bottom of this page. Does anyone have any questions? All right. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, this is for the direct deposit authorization. Again, you want to make sure first of all, it is the employee's responsibility to make sure that this information is correct. We have no way to verify banking information for employees, so it's the employee's responsibility to make sure any banking information, whether it be account numbers, routing numbers, and what type of accounts they're using, that is their responsibility. And in the payroll system that Tolani Lake Enterprises uses, if it is the wrong account number, that payment will get kicked back. It will get returned to the company, and the payment will not go through to the bank. The bank will notify us, or our payroll system will notify us, this is an incorrect number, or the account is closed, and that employee will not get paid in a timely manner. So we want to make sure that the employee knows it's their responsibility to put the correct information on this form. At the end of this page, it has an employee signature line and date, and also, again, a TLE employee authorizing signature. That should be the hiring manager or the payroll specialist posting this information into the system. And on this slide, again, is the note that If the employee is getting paid other than direct deposit, to write down on the new hire sheet, the front cover page, how the employee is going to be getting paid. Any questions on this form? All right, next slide. Okay, the one thing I do want to mention before we get to the session review is about timesheets. If you have hourly employees that have timesheets, those timesheets I would keep close to this employee file. So we have an easy tracking place to go review if there's any questions. You know, we know that the timesheets are kept with the payroll withholding forms. It makes sense for them to be kept there. And for auditing purposes as well, if there's a start date, which is what these auditing entities would look for as a start date and an end date, if the employee had termed, then it's an easy go-to place to pull the first time card and the last time sheet to see what those were, and that it's documented. So that's another thing I can stress about how timesheets are handled. Any other questions? The one thing I don't know if this has come up at all, but if you have any employees that are illiterate, can't read or write in any way, and that's when a translator comes into play on these documents a lot as well. And if they are getting paid by check, and to fill out these forms where their employee line, where the signature line is for the employee, that employee can also sign their name with an X on that line if they don't know how to write their name. If they are getting paid by check and they don't know how to read or write, they can also sign the back of a check with an X to endorse it to the bank and just show their ID.
Thank you, Lori. I disconnected and reconnected, so I don't know if I missed something.
Okay. So I don't think I have any other questions. Is there any questions from any participants at this time? Again, I'll have Elizabeth email or send out my email address to each and every one of you. So if there are any specific questions that come into play, I know circumstances come up, and you know, this session's pretty short. So if there's any questions that come up later, please feel free to email me, and then just in the subject line, put Tolani Lake Enterprises or TLE, and I'll know where it's coming from if I haven't heard from you previously, and I'll address any questions that come through at that time.
Thank you, Lori. We're going to do a quick session review now. Can we go to the next slide, AJ? Wrap this up. All right. Okay, so we talked about a lot today. And as we committed at the beginning, we will definitely have another session, and it's definitely needed, but we're going to do a review. So employee or independent contractor, and we'll just let people, if you want to shout out and take off mute, you can do that. If you want to answer it in the chat box, we're going to let you free form it, however you want to answer it. AJ, help me keep up with the answers. So what could be a classification difference between an employee and an independent contractor? That's how we started our day out, is like understanding the difference between an employee and independent contractor. And I know we also had, was it Marilyn that was trying to like say, what could I look at to help me identify the difference between an independent contractor or an employee? But if we could get somebody to volunteer, that they thought would be a good way to tell the difference and share it with us based on today's learnings, that would be great. The difference between an independent contractor and an employee when I'm making a decision for hiring.
This is Marilyn. I'm thinking the individual would have a specialized, like a specialized field that they're working with, and they have their own equipment, their own tools. They set their own time. That's what I would think. Thank
Very
you.
good. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. That's a one way to look for an independent contractor. Good job. Yep. Anybody else want to talk about the difference between independent contractor and an employee?
For an independent contractor, you don't pay, you don't withhold income tax, Social Security, Medicare from wages paid. That becomes a responsibility of the independent contractor. So I like to think of, may not be right, but I know you can have like temporary employees, but for me, I like to think of it as like long-term employees. Like if a person is going to be hired on long-term, they could be considered an employee, someone worth investing that type of those benefits for that person, I guess. I don't know, is how I see the difference between an employee and an independent contractor.
Elizabeth,
Well,
this
yes.
is Verna. The way I guess I can, it has helped me from when I was starting out in administration, was to, for us contractors were issued 1099s. And then for employees, regular employees or part-time employees or seasonal employees, they filled out W-4 forms. So that would be, and for me, that was the difference between the two.
Those are all good indicators. Lori, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say before you get to the W-4 and the 1099 is you have to decipher what each one of those roles is going to be first. But once it gets to the administrative desk, yes, those decisions should already be made and those forms should be in hand appropriately at that time.
Yeah, my comment was for Marilyn. She wanted to know what the difference was. That was just one way that I was able to determine from the beginning. So it's just helpful.
Yes, you're right. You are correct.
Thank you.
And no, thank you for great questions and great activities we had earlier. I think a key learning for me was that we definitely will put together something to really identify the independent contractor because there still are some lines that will get crossed between employee and independent contractor. But what I heard were the two key things. One is how they're, who pays their own tax versus what the company does with the payroll taxes. And the other one is the responsibility that we give an employee versus the more freedom that an independent contractor has, and that we both have to abide by those scope of work. So we will definitely do more work on this. I do have in the slide here, which this will be presented at the irs.gov on more information about an independent contractor or self-employed employees. So if you want to dig deeper before our training, please feel free to do that. Can we go to the next slide?
I got a question.
Yes.
This is Gary.
Can you go back, AJ? Yes, Gary.
Would the contractor have also a written contract along with his paperwork?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so typically, yes, when we bring on an independent contractor, they would have a contract that would include a scope of work versus an employee would typically have a job offer with a job description. So those would be two ways to determine both of them. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Another thing I want to interject here between the 1099 and the W-4. With a regular employee, the employer decides their rate of pay. With an independent contractor, the rate of pay is usually set by that service provider. So on the contract, the contractor would put together a proposal and say, this is how much I'm going to do this job for my services. So that is another swing between the two, is how the rate of pay is decided as a guide.
Good point. All right, anything else on employee and independent contractor before we go to the next learning? AJ, please go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, then we talked about being prepared in the employee personnel records. So why is it important to prepare for the new hire before the first day they report to work? And what are some of the legal requirements in preparation? So what are some of the things that we learned about preparation and legal requirements? What about the two different files that we should have on file for the employee and why?
There should be a personnel file and a medical file or private classified file. But I think it would be important to have these beforehand rather than one stumbling through the hire date, trying to gather these documents and files as they arrive. It's better to always be prepared
Very
in
yes.
advance.
Yes, thank you very much. Preparation really does help get things going a lot smoother. Absolutely agree. Anybody else want to add to preparation before the employee arrives that we talked about today, or even anything else that they'd like to speak to?
I do have a question. So say this is like the legality of it. So say you hire someone on just like handshake, hey, I want you to do this job for me, and eventually I'll give you a 1099 to fill out. So they do the job, right? And then like a couple weeks pass, and then you go back to them, or even months, and say, hey, can you fill this out? At that point in time, are they allowed? Are they I don't know, at that point they can choose not to fill out a 1099, correct?
Lori.
Yeah.
This will be
so this is one of the reasons why we're doing this workshop. Number one.
So we can make sure people get paid, but.
Yeah. So ideally, you want all these forms to be filled out way before they step foot on that job site or in that office. And that would avoid, all the going back and trying to get paperwork. The only thing I can say is if you do have to go back and fill out paperwork, that employee's signature is going to be key. So if they are going back and filling out paperwork, that person needs to be dating that paperwork as their start date. So they're saying they are agreeing, as of my start date, I agree that all this information is correct.
Okay.
And from a HR perspective, I would even go one step further and just have them sign saying, hey, we're cleaning up our files. Can you help us get that they know and you guys recognize that you're doing a file cleanup, and just to go into their file so that you're not, so there's no liability of them coming back later saying that you made them, but there's an understanding.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, in this new day and age of COVID-19, do we have anything dealing with that?
I mean, we can always email documents out to employees, for them to fill out. They are going to go to a job site at some time, right, to do work? Or are you talking remote from or work from home?
Both. Well,
Both.
more of a on-site kind of work working with other employees?
Okay. It is the employee's responsibility to get the proper payroll tax forms to the employer before they start work. So because of COVID, I mean, we can easily email out forms. So if they need a translator or anything because of COVID, I know that it's really crazy, but we can get those forms to the right person to either help that employee out, or the hiring manager can get forms to that employee electronically. But that paperwork also has to be returned before that person starts the work in order to get paid.
Did that answer your question, Gary?
Yeah, more or less.
Gary,
I think
do you
something
do you have a
more-
specific scenario where this happened?
It's more or less already kind of happened at TLE.
That's why we're having this, Gary.
Yeah, we
being that
know.
I'm board president, you know, I don't want anybody to get that. And unfortunately, we've already ran into that in the
Yeah.
middle of the whole deal.
Yeah.
Um,
We want to make
That's
this
why I say-
process, we want to make this process as easy and usable for both parties, for the employer and the employee. So, and safe too.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. And I'm just wondering from TLE's part, if we're missing something that we need to be covered
Yeah.
because of the COVID-19.
Definitely
Okay, thank you.
definitely something to discuss further on a process for that as well. So we can talk about that. I'll get with Elizabeth and, you know, Stephanie if necessary, and we can talk about a process for that.
Okay.
All right, so
we
definitely,
have-
so go ahead, AJ.
No, I was just gonna say there's another question in the chat, but if you were gonna refer back to Gary's question, then go ahead.
Yeah, just really quick. So Gary, one of the things I heard though with that is like, we want to make sure we have COVID accommodations. And we, and I say we, I'm talking about Nalda, AJ, Alita, Sean, Lori, we all want to make sure that we make whatever right has happened with some of these gaps in what's going on with payroll right now with TLE to support the organization as a whole and moving forward. And we will definitely take it COVID accommodations into play. So thank you for that. AJ, go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. The question in the chat is from May, and she asked if a request for a proposal is done, would that be considered as a contractor?
Yes. For a service provider, what if an RFP is done, then that's an independent contractor.
Does that answer your question, May?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Can we go to the next slide? All righty. So new hire paperwork. Lori walked us through that just a few minutes ago, but there's still some questions we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with it. So the new hire paperwork, we said that by the end of the session, you would know a little bit more about the new hire employee paperwork. We know we still need to work some more on the contract paperwork, which we will. But any questions on how to properly fill out new hire documents or where to go to find the answers? Does anybody have any questions on where to find out how to fill it out? If you don't know how to fill it out based on what Lori walked through with you. So if you need to fill it out, where would you find the answers to fill out that W-4, for example?
IRS.gov.
That's one place. Yep. Where else might you find the answer? I believe all of the forms come, do they all come with the directions as well, Lori, or? Yep.
Yeah, every form has a list of instructions on it attached. So if there's any questions, you can always refer to those instructions, and the employee should be referring to those instructions as well.
Yeah. And why are some of the legal reasons these need to be filled out properly and timely?
So when you're audited, you're legally prepared.
That's
Good answer.
for the auditor. That's good.
Yeah, and the other thing, we also want to make sure the employee is paid on time. I mean, I know there's been some issues with that, and issues with, just disconnect, I would say, paperwork disconnect that needs to be gapped. We're trying to fill that gap and make sure everyone's trained, knows the reasons why, how, and when to get this stuff done. So we're protecting, TLE and the employee at this point. To me, that's the most important part too.
Yes, making sure we take care of our employees. Yes. Why is it the right thing for, we just answered this. Why is this the right thing for the employee that these are completed properly and in a timely manner?
There you go.
We want to do the right thing for our community, right? We don't want whatever this gap that we just ran into at TLE to happen for anyone else or anyone else out there to have to worry about that. So we want to put some processes in place and give some education to the community so we can all support one another to do the right thing. And not only that, but the more time that, the less time we have to spend on doing it right the first time, the more time we have to do what we really want to do, which is community work. It's not chasing the paperwork. Any questions on the new hire paperwork or comments or feedback as it relates to new hire employee? Hiring a new employee. You go to the next slide.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, I just saw Sean's comment in the chat box.
Okay.
And she mentioned that TLE has a statement in all of our scopes of work regarding following CDC guidelines.
Okay. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
So let's review your learning objectives from the start of the session. So we're going to begin with the end in mind, and AJ is going to let us know to see if we have met your learning objectives for today. You ready, AJ?
Yeah, I wrote down the objectives. Do you want me to go ahead and just read them?
Yep, if you could read one at a time and we'll see if we met that objective.
Okay. The first one was, I'd like to learn more specifically the process of onboarding an employee.
So do we feel like we've met that objective today?
Yes, this is Marilyn. I think that my objective was met. Thank you so much.
No, great, thank you. We just need to get to the contractor side, which we will get to that. Okay, the next objective, AJ.
Okay. The second one, I hope to learn how to clearly determine whether a person should be an employee or a contractor.
How are we with that? How did we meet your objective with that one? Okay, I will just take that we have more work to do because no news is good news, but also no news is we're going to be working on that one anyway for our next training. Okay, next comment.
Okay, the third one, Learning the process for hiring on people, whether as an employee or independent contractor.
It's about the same as Sean's question.
Okay. Which is, do we feel like we have like at least a broader idea with just more detail on the independent contractor?
I think so, and I think the chart was very, very useful, very helpful too as well.
Great.
Yeah, and this is Sean, as were the scenarios, so thanks for that.
Perfect. All right, AJ.
Okay. Let's see. The fourth one, learning the process, including new employees.
Did we address that? Does everybody feel like we addressed the process that included new employees? Okay, next one, next objective.
Okay. Willing to learn more on tax forms.
So did we learn some more about the tax forms that Lori shared with us, or are there additional tax forms that we need to work on that you would like to learn about? And if you want to talk, the buttons are on mute. So you would just go ahead and go down to the bottom left hand of your corner, and there's a little microphone, and you would push the red to unmute, or you could actually go into the chat box and give an answer if you would like. So what was that one again? That we had somebody had a learning objective of learning. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, they willing to learn more on tax forms.
Okay. So did you feel like you got what you needed, or do you need more information on tax forms? And if you want to answer us later when I give you Lori's email address, you can certainly reply to her and I, and we can certainly give you more information if you'd like. Okay. And the next one?
Actually, I have a quick question. This is Alika.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Regarding the same question I asked for the addresses versus the physical and the PO box mailing address. I know that some forms that I did receive back had the PO box on it, and Nalda had mentioned, I think it was for the QuickBooks that needed to be inputted with the physical address. So do I go ahead from the beginning, try to get the physical and the PO box address before submitting them?
Anything in QuickBooks is going to be a mailing address. Again, that's going to be where their tax forms get mailed to. That's how QuickBooks reads that. It's going to be a mailing address.
Okay, Nalda, are you there? I just wanted to clarify.
So it can either be it can be a physical address or a PO box. Is that what you're saying, Lori?
I'm saying that wherever they receive their mail is what needs to go in that line item.
Okay, so it's not necessary to get a physical address.
No, because QuickBooks, they're just using that as where am I going to send the W-2 to?
Okay.
All right. Next learning objective.
Yeah, the next one was about the administrative hiring process for employees and contractors.
And so again, we'll go back with employees and contractors unless there's something new to add to that, but we will definitely dive more into the contractor side of it. Was there anything else that we missed on that one when the person who put that one down for their learning objective? Okay, next one, AJ.
Okay, next one, learning the difference between each tax form.
Okay. And we learned a lot of the differences between employee tax forms. So if there's again any additional comments, please let us know now or in the chat box or email Lori when we send out her email address. Okay, next one.
Okay, the next one, staff members' role within the organization. And
So
I remember they mentioned the pressure on forms.
That pardon me? I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that last part. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. The last part was just they wanted a refresher on the forms. I remember them saying that. Yeah.
Okay, so we did not address that one. So that is going to be internal for administration. So I have that as a note. So we'll take that off. Okay.
Okay. And then the last one is the hiring process for employees and contractors. And they elaborated more on the tools nonprofits use in the community and how they understand the differences.
Okay. So hopefully we gave you some tools today. I know that the TLE group, we are working on additional tools that we're happy to share once we get them completed. And then we will also offer this training. Lori and I need to sit down together to identify when we can do the training. And then we need to sit down with the TLE group to see when the training will work best to go ahead and do the one on contractors. But we're happy to share whatever tools we put together. Do you find the tools that that Lori had me send out to you guys helpful at this point and going through those?
I
Hello?
have a question. Might be a really quick question. Someone had asked.
Yes,
I
please
think
go
it
ahead.
was- Let's see. Aletha, she asked if we have someone working on multiple projects, can we use one employee application for the whole year as well as the W-9 for the calendar year, but with a new contract with each contracting job? So I know you said that you would just use one W-9 for that one person, and they would get a 1099 with the total amount that they were paid throughout the year. So say like there was a large time gap between each contracting job, would you at that point, would you on the I-9, is it the I-9? Is that part where you would fill in the rehire? Would you do the re-verification for rehire? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Up to a certain point. I mean, we can't go like 3 years, you know, but if it's throughout a
Yeah.
couple year process, then yeah. And I would verify their documents every time you rehire anyway. So for any scenario, whether it's a regular employee or an independent contractor, I would always verify, you know. The one thing I like to do too, like if you have a laborer and they're, I'm sorry, if you have a service provider that works on the farm, let's say working heavy equipment, and you're providing the equipment, you're providing the tractor, I would make sure every year that you're taking a copy of the driver's license for their file, even as a 1099 contractor. And we can get into this when we go into bigger 1099 discussions, but I don't know if you guys have workers right now that are 1099 and they're working heavy equipment. And Sean, you might be able to answer this too. I would take a copy of their driver's license so you have it for insurance purposes if they're working under your liability insurance.
I suspect that will be the case, that we'll have a lot of those under ARPA. We did last time under CARES. So yeah. Good idea.
Okay.
Want to go to the next screen, AJ? If there are any other questions and answers, we want to make sure that we give you the time to do that. That was a great question. I appreciate you, Lori, for giving up the time and you bringing your expertise to the group here. Thank you very much. Appreciate you, AJ, for being the moderator today. Appreciate you, Sean, for making sure we were hooked up through all of the technology with Zoom. And I appreciate each and every one of you for being on the call and being interactive and sharing with us what you want, but also asking clarifying questions so that we can make sure we get you what you need. My commitment is to go ahead and send out Lori's email to everyone. And then once we get the second training date set up for the contract, we'll work through the same format with Sean and AJ on getting that information out to everyone. With that, I am going to leave it as open to Q&A. Lori, did you want to say anything else, or AJ, before we close down today?
No, I mean, my biggest thing is don't ever assume any law or liability for the company's sake or for the employee's sake. So please, please, please don't be afraid to ask questions. Bombard me. I don't care. I will answer. And if I don't have the answer, I will find the answer. So I have lots of people that I go to that are attorneys and accountants, in the accounting world like myself. So I have lots of resources and would be more than willing to help you guys with anything you need.
I do have one quick question, I guess, just to clarify with the hiring process for TLE. We are going to be going on site to the farms and handing over the sheets, having them fill it out right there and taking them back right there.
Okay.
Am I getting the right understanding here?
So, Alita, yeah, so we'll talk about that separate as a best practice suggestion that we can like toss it around. But we definitely need to do something different where we're not chasing down paper, and we need to figure out a different process. And so that was one of the suggested processes. But we will definitely talk about that as a group.
Okay, that sounds good.
No, good question.
I think I just had a question about how the Zoom recording will be available to people. Yeah.
Sean, could you help us with that?
Sorry, I was blabbering away with the mute on. I will have a link available to AJ. You want me to just send it to you, and then it's going to be a link to the cloud, and we can put it on the YouTube channel. But I don't know how to do that. If you do, AJ, we'll just send you the YouTube link, and otherwise the Zoom link. So maybe we can work that out.
Yeah, we can work that out. I think.
Okay, great.
All the links. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Does anybody else have anything else? Appreciate all of you. You can reach out to me anytime as well. We appreciate you guys and look forward to working with you as we move forward. All right.
Thank you.
Great training, you guys. Thanks so much. Tons of
Thank you
information.
guys. Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.